Flames have been extinguished. The Islanders ground the Flyers, and the Avalanche are crumbling before our eyes. It's Tuesday, and this is a Hockey Debates podcast powered by SportsBettingDime.com. Welcome, everyone. I'm Bob Duff, as always joined by my colleague, esteemed Hall of Fame hockey writer Kevin Allen, and today we're happy to be joined by Kristen Anderson of the Calgary Herald, who covers the Calgary Flames beat and is going to talk all about what went wrong in Calgary, as she just mentioned before we came on the air, kind of an instant replay of last season. So why don't we just start with that, Kristen? It looked so good against the Jets, and then it seemed to just go off the rails against Dallas. Where do you think it went south for the Flames?
Yeah, I mean, obviously every team is in the same boat this year. It's such an unprecedented season, and having that long layoff, 5 months off of actual competition, and then all of a sudden you're back in playing 100 miles an hour hockey. And you know what? The Flames looked really good against the Winnipeg Jets, as you mentioned. They were playing kind of a complete game, a defensive game, which we hadn't really seen in years in playoffs past. And they were also playing physical. Milan Lucic was a big part of that. Sam Bennett was a big part of that in like dictating the tone and speed. Obviously, they had some power play production from their top line. Although that 5-on-5 play for Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan, and Elias Lindholm really seemed to hurt them in the end. And then against the Dallas Stars, like they were 11.9 seconds away from, being ahead in the series, winning game 4, being ahead in the series, 3-1, and then being able to close it out in game 5. But they, Joe Pavelski scored right with 11.9 seconds remaining to send the game into overtime, and then they lost in overtime, and then that seemed to derail them for game 5, and then it was such a slow game 5 for them. And then game 6 happened, and it was like it was a total implosion after that 3-goal lead. All of a sudden it was 3-3, and everybody knows the rest. So 7 unanswered goals scored by the Dallas Stars. And yeah, you look at all the same questions that we were asking at this time. Well, not this time, but like at the end of the season last year. It's the same problems. They had goaltending. Goaltending wasn't an issue, although Cam Talbot didn't play his greatest game in game 6. Coaching, you look at Jeff Ward, it's such a different scenario for him to come into the fold and then kind of progress with the team. But was that the mistake? I don't know. I don't think it was a coaching error or coaching was the issue during playoffs. And so then you have to look at the core group, the Sean Monahans, Johnny Gaudreau, Mark Giordano didn't have a great playoffs, and he's aging. He's going to be 37 when the season does eventually start again. So you have to look at all of these things, and they have a ton of UFAs that they'll need to sign this off season as well. So you'll really wonder if Brad Treliving is going to, wholesale change. He didn't make a lot of changes last year. So you wonder if this is the year that it's time for change, and it's time to shake up this core, because there's something missing. There seems to be an element that's missing that gets them over the hump of the playoff race. And, they've won one series since 2004, and I don't think that's going to cut it. I mean, they think that they won a series this year with the Winnipeg Jets play-in round, but technically they did lose out in the first round again. So this fan base here in Calgary is upset. I think the players, aren't very happy, and Brad Treliving can't be satisfied with the way this team has sort of progressed over the last few years.
Kristen, prior to the series against Dallas, I ended up picking Dallas to win that series. And, I've covered the league a long time, and it's the first time I can remember, maybe I'd done it before, that I made my pick not based on how well the team I picked was playing, but their opponent, Calgary. I took Dallas because I've learned to have a sort of a mistrust of the Flames. You alluded to kind of the script inconsistency. They're almost like two different teams. Like I see them and I'm so impressed with them, and then all of a sudden they disintegrate, and I just don't have any belief in them. And now going into this offseason, now I look at their defense and it's all UFAs. And as you mentioned, Giordano is aging, and it looks like there's going to be some heavy lifting to try to piece that defense sort of back together and just make all those decisions. Can you kind of walk us through your thoughts on why this team is inconsistent the way it is, and two, where do you see the defense going? Like, who stays? What will they try to do?
Such good questions. Like I don't know what the actual issue is of why they can't seem to get past the playoffs or absorb that playoff. The challenges that happen during playoffs, obviously being behind in a series, being ahead in a series, being able to close out games. And people reference, oh, well, this team is inexperienced. Well, not really. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau's 27. Sean Monahan, I think he's a bit older, or 1 year older than Johnny Gaudreau. To me, these players should have the type of mental and physical ability to withstand a playoff series and go deep. Like, Brad Shillerving's been rebuilding this team since 2014, since the Jerome McGinley days, since the Mika Kiprusoff era, and has had lots of time to put his stamp on this team. There have been some major mistakes that he's made in the UFA market, like on July 1st, he's overpaid for James Neal, Troy Brower, some really ineffective players that just didn't work out in Calgary. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Like, I don't know why. It just seems that, like you said, they're such a predictable team when it comes to playoffs, because they don't seem to be a very mentally strong team that can handle those shifts and ebbs and flows. And Milan Lucic was really interesting. I mean, he's not the player that he was. He was pretty effective these playoffs, but he referenced it so many times that playoffs are a grind. It's a totally different type of, season. And it takes that being able to sort of rally in the face of adversity, and for whatever reason, and I can't blame it on, and you can't blame it on experience, because these players have gone through different types of experiences during playoffs since 2015. I don't see what the issue is. So, Brad Shillerving is really going to have to make a lot of decisions, and maybe that does start with the defense. You can't really expect Mark Giordano to continue playing those top minutes that he has been playing. He was injured earlier this season around the trade deadline, which kind of forced Brad's hand into going out and getting Eric Gustafsson and Derek Forbort, two proven NHLers, one of which, Eric Gustafsson, who is proven on the power play, which could replace Mark Giordano on the power play. But I don't think those are long-term solutions. Juuso Välimäki was a big piece that was missing for their defense core this year. He was a really young prospect that the Flames think highly of, that they wanted to insert into the lineup, and thought that he was going to have a really big year in his first year. But he blew out his knee last summer. Rasmus Anderson and Noah Hannafin took huge strides, and I would say they took even bigger strides in the playoffs. And Rasmus Anderson had a broken foot for the majority of it. So, you look at those pieces that you build around, and then there's Travis Hamonic. Are they going to re-sign him? He chose not to participate in the playoffs because of family reasons and just health reasons. And so, do you sign him again? And then TJ Brody was one of their most effective defensemen after having such an off year last year. So you'd think that you'd want to re-up him, but again, flat cap. How much money are they going to have? Rasmus Anderson's contract's kicking in at the start of the upcoming season. So they're only has so many dollars. So they're going to have to maybe look at moving some of those core pieces like Johnny Gaudreau, Sean Monahan. Now, the other side of that is who replaces the regular season scoring if you trade those guys? And B, what are you going to get for them if these two guys can't prove themselves in playoffs? Who's going to really want two guys that are pretty ineffective when the team needs them the most? So Yeah, like it's a I don't know, it's repetitive in Calgary right now. I know the fans are sick of it. You go on social media and it's a war zone of fans who are so upset about the way things have been. But um, it's a different. I think this is a different off season in so many ways for Brad Treliving because he's got to make some decisions here.
So, what do you think? Obviously, Flames were kind of forced into a coaching change by circumstances beyond their control. Do you think Jeff Ward is safe? Are they going to be reluctant to want to switch coaches yet again and start from scratch, or do you think they are going to explore their options in that department?
What else is out there? Like, I know people in Calgary are calling for, well, Gerard Gallant, Peter Laviolette, some of those, quote unquote sexier names on the market. But like, is that going to really solve your problem at the end of the day? The Flames have gone through like 4 coaches in the last, 4 or 5 years, right? So there's been Bob Hartley they've tried, and he was apparently too hard on the players. And then Glenn Gulletson they had for 2 years, and apparently he was too soft on the players. And then you have Bill Peters. Obviously we all know what happened with that and the controversy surrounding that. So they were, like you said, they were forced into keeping things calm and just promoting Jeff Ward into the mix, who has a ton of experience. He hadn't been an NHL coach or head coach at the NHL level prior to this position, but he's won in Boston. He's been an assistant coach in the NHL for a number of years. He's confident in his abilities. Players like him. Do you change again? And then for what? The fact if you get a Peter Laviolette or a Gerard Gallant or a Bruce Boudreau in the mix, like, does that guarantee you success? I don't know. Maybe, you look at the winning coaches at the coaching Stanley Cup winning teams, and they don't have a lot of experience either. But what's the common denominator? I guess, like, you have to sort of look at that, and you have to look at the way that the players did respond under Jeff Ward. And I think the majority of the season that's where you're going to take your biggest body of work, and your biggest example is during the regular season, I would say, before the pause, as well as in the playoffs. But, people were furious at Jeff Ward for pulling Cam Talbot in that game 6 when Talbot's been your best player the entire series, the entire playoff. So it's it's a tough call. And then you look at the list of coaches that are currently serving in the NHL, and the longest serving coach is John Cooper, and he's only been there for 6 years, which, is a long time, I guess, in today's world. But I don't know if that's the solution, is just a revolving door of coaches. So it's a tough call. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know which way Brad Treliving is leaning towards. I think he jumped the gun when he hired Bill Peters and fired Glenn Gulletson. Maybe Glenn Gulletson definitely wasn't the guy, but I don't think Bill Peters obviously was. So I don't know. It's a total crapshoot what happens this year, in terms of them taking that interim tag off of Jeff Ward's name.
Is Brad Treliving in any trouble there?
I've been asked that, and I wrote about it at the start of the season last year, before he had signed his, 2 days before he signed his contract. I wrote about, is this the end of Brad Treliving? Could this mean, if they don't make the playoffs this year, is this the end of Brad Treliving? And I don't know. Calgary's such a difficult market. The ownership group is it's a complicated dance that a general manager has to do in Calgary. I could see that, but then again, who else is out there? Or do you just promote within? Do you promote, give Craig Conroy a chance? I know that there was a lot of talk a number of years ago with him potentially, going to Buffalo and being the GM there. Is he ready for that kind of role? And then in the same breath, I could totally see them sticking with Brad Treliving, trusting with him. But he's made a lot of mistakes over the years, and he can't seem to find a goalie or make a decision on a goalie. And then the coaching thing is a big blemish on his resume. But I think generally he's a smart GM. He has made some savvy moves, and especially with the signing contracts and making sure the numbers all work out. But yeah, like you have to wonder. He was hired in the spring of 2014. It's 2020 now, and is this team any further ahead? I don't really think so.
You've talked about Johnny Gaudreau, but just a quick hit. What would you rate his approval rating with fans right now? 1 to 100%. Like, where's Johnny at?
So we do this every year. We do at the Calgary Herald and Calgary Sun. We do a "You Be the Boss," so it gives it gives fans a chance to weigh in on these types of questions. Almost, I just checked. There was over 3,000 responses. The survey had been up for less than 24 hours. There was almost 3,000 responses, and I think it was 80% of that number wanted to see him gone. So. And you know what? You talked to him yesterday, and he wants to stay. He wants to be a Flame. He wants to retire here. And I don't know. Like, it's fans. If they keep him, he has another bad year. If he has another, kind of no show in playoffs, and I shouldn't say complete no show because he did have some production on the power play, so that counts for something. But yeah, like. People are not happy with the way things are going with him here in Calgary, but I don't know. That's a tough call. You build your team around a guy. You have to really think hard about the consequences of that and what you would be able to acquire for him for a player like that.
Yeah, you never get full value when you trade a star. It's almost impossible because of that. Yeah.
Unless your name's John Tavares and you have one of those.
Yes.
I don't know. I guess he signed as a free agent, but yeah, I don't know. It's and then people are just so quick to ship him. They assume that he wants to go back to Philadelphia or play for the Flyers because his family's from there and he has his off-season home is there. But people are quick to make that connection. But I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the.
Yeah, I don't think they need him. They've got their own star power there. I don't think they need Johnny.
Yeah.
Fans always seem to forget that a salary cap exists when they talk about trades too.
Yeah, and then the market value for a player. I mean, I don't know. I don't really think the Flames are interested in giving up somebody like Juuso Välimäki or another first-round pick or anything that was going to deter them from sort of wherever their plan is, I guess, at this point. So.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today, Kristen. You're one of my favorite writers to read. Your personality really comes through in your writing, and you certainly know the Flames inside and out. And we thank you for joining us, and hopefully we can have you back again when the Flames are playing real games again next season.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for reading. I appreciate it.
Okay. Have a great day.
Bye.
All right. Well, that's a lot of mess in Calgary, certainly, Kevin, and not, as Kristen pointed out, not questions that are easily answered or problems that are easily solved.
No, on balance, I like Brad Treliving, and I respect the job he does. He's made mistakes, but when GMs make big mistakes and people ask me about GMs, I always tell the story of once calling Boston Bruins general manager Harry Sinden at the trade deadline because I wanted to do a story about all the great trades he's made. We all know he's made some doozies where he's landed some pretty big players. And Harry said to me, "I'll be happy to do it, Kevin." He said, "But I want you to do a sidebar on all the bad trades I've made." And I laughed and I said, "Why?" He says, "Because people, you need some luck to have successful trades. And sometimes I thought I made great trades and they've turned out to be duds. And sometimes I was just lukewarm on a trade and it's turned out to be, terrific." And I think, Treliving has done a reasonably good job. And I think a lot of the things he's done has had logic attached to them, but they haven't worked out. But saying all that, this is a performance-oriented business, and I'm sure if the Flames don't do something in the postseason relatively soon, like maybe next year, he will be on the hot seat. And I think they could trade Johnny Gaudreau because there's always a team or two that thinks they have the people there that can get the best out of someone, even if he hasn't performed in the playoffs. And we've seen this so often in hockey where people say, well, this guy is not a great playoff performer. And then he is all of a sudden. And, there's no explanation for it. They used to say Ed Belfour couldn't win in the playoffs until he did. And then he was a Hall of Famer. And, Steve Yzerman in Detroit was blamed for failures for years when the Red Wings couldn't get beyond the Edmonton Oilers when they had a pretty good team but not a great team. And then all of a sudden they got the right players in, and then Steve was the greatest captain in the history of the world. I think with Calgary, there is something to the idea that they don't have the right mix. When you watch them, I think when you can't figure out what's wrong, then the mix is wrong. And I think that's what sort of Kristen was saying, that it's hard to put your finger on it, like what's wrong. It's not all Johnny Gaudreau, and it wasn't all goaltending. As she mentioned, Talbot played pretty well against Winnipeg. But something's wrong there, and they've got to kind of sort it out. And it really is interesting. If you go to capfriendly.com and look at their defense for next season, all you see is a bunch of UFAs, Giordano and Rasmus. They're tied up. Yeah, and Hannafin is tied up as well. But everyone else is pretty much a UFA, and they've got to make some hard decisions on who stays and who goes. And I don't think it's easy. Like she mentioned, Brody played well, and they'd like to keep him. What do they do with Hamonic, who's can be a glue type defenseman when he's playing well? So it won't be easy to decide. But they got 4 guys there that I think they're pretty happy with. So it's not like they can take everybody.
Well, let's move on and talk about some of the other series now. And as always, the Hockey Debates podcast is brought to you by sportsbettingdime.com, your leading source for odds, sports news, and game predictions. If you're looking to see who's the favorite to win the Stanley Cup, the Hart Trophy, or who's going to win a specific series, check out all the info at sportsbettingdime.com. We're going to talk about some of their Stanley Cup odds going forward here today. And at the end of the show, we'll also leave you a link in the description of this episode so you can check out their site for yourself. Now, we mentioned at the top of the show, the Avs. I mean, here's a team I had picked to win the Cup, and suddenly their goalie and one of their, Eric Johnson, probably an unheralded member of their defense, but a solid rock defenseman guy that you have to have the win, are both gone, and sounds like they're gone for a while. So it looks like Colorado's in big trouble.
Well, I mean, this is the NHL. How do you explain, we watched that Dallas team, and, it's almost like a joke. How many Dallas players does it take to score a goal? It looked like they had to work so hard to get a goal. Now, all of a sudden against Colorado, they're finding all sorts of goals, plenty of goals. All of a sudden they look like they can make some noise. Are they a team that you could ride all the way into the finals? Well, I'm not going to say no because I've covered the NHL too long. But that Colorado team is a more talented team, to be sure. So, it's just a matter of can they overcome the loss of their goalkeeper and, a defenseman. Their injuries are starting to really kind of hit them. But let's give credit to Dallas. They've pulled it all together. And Khudobin has always been a very dependable number 2 goalie, and has been number 1 in certain spans when guys have been injured and such. So it's not like he hasn't had any experience. He's a guy that certainly knows his way around the net.
It's funny, you talk about goalies, and there was all these legendary stories about how, you had to be different to be a goalie, and they're a little bit off the beaten path when it comes to normalcy. And that really hasn't been the case for the most part in this last era, except for Russian goalies. You think of Ilya Brizgalov, you think of Javi Bulin, and
He was the best.
Yeah. The real character too. Like there's something about Russian goalies, they're just old school in terms of being a bit off the wall.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. One thing that the game has evolved obviously, and the rules are a little bit different than they were, and we've tried to put more safety in the game. But what hasn't changed in all the years of that we've been playing this is the importance of goalkeeping in the postseason. Like you're not going anywhere with a mediocre goalie. You gotta have a hot goalie, or you at least have to have a goalie that's not going to lose it for you at any point during the playoffs. You look at the teams that are left, and I wanted to make a point today too, because I wanted to get your thoughts on it, because I've been thinking about this. I wonder if this third round of games, really the second round in the playoffs, the second official round, because we had the qualification round. But this is the third series now that some teams have had to play, in particular the New York Islanders, who have been very impressive in the way they've played. I wonder if this isn't the key round. And I say that because, the novelty of being in the bubble is worn off. A lot of people have left. They're home now in their off season. These people now that have been playing 3 rounds in their third round of hockey, they haven't seen their family in a while, and then they think, if you count the round we're playing now, which has just started, we still got to win 3 more rounds if we want to win the cup. Like, even though you're in the second round, there's still a long way to go in this. Long way to go. And so I just wonder if there's ever, this is to me when the mental toughness, has to take over. Because if you're the Islanders, you've already had to conquer 2 foes in 2 different series. One of them was a best of 5. That Barry Trotz had to beat his former team. Now here we are in the third round, and you're just not even quite halfway there yet, and you're playing one of the hottest teams in the NHL, in the Philadelphia. Well, I think this is going to show us how mentally tough the Islanders are, because Philadelphia didn't have to play that qualification round, so it'll be interesting. I wonder if that's going to play a factor in the results of this officially second round, but third round of competition.
Yeah, and you wondered did that play a role in the demise of the St. Louis Blues? I mean, were they thinking, do we really want to spend 3 months inside this bubble to win something we just won? I mean, it's interesting that 6 of the 8 teams left haven't won the cup in quite a long time.
Yeah.
And, you've got, Vegas hasn't won it, but they just played. Boston and Vegas just both recently played for it. But even Boston, it's been, this will be 7 years if they don't win this year. So anyway, these are not teams that have a fresh Stanley Cup on their resume. So there is a hunger there. So I think, maybe that is a factor for these teams that, the Capitals too, they didn't look like themselves. And you wonder, is there an element of that in the, maybe it's not in their conscious, but maybe in their subconscious that, I've got my cup ring. Do I really want to spend 3 months locked up in this bubble and trying to win something I just got?
Yeah, but I think that's a good point, and I think that's probably a valid. I think players do kind of think like that, but also I know there's some people who think, there's winning a cup, and then there's the next layer of can you win 2 in a row. I mean, that's a unique group, that's can win back-to-back cups. We used to see them make runs of 3 and 4. The Islanders did it. The Edmonton Oilers won 5 and 7, 4 and 6, something. They won, but we don't see that grouping anymore. The Blackhawks won 3 and 6, but they couldn't win back to back. So I think there is something to that. But you're probably right. They don't have the same hunger that they had before they won their first one.
Well, I wrote a piece for Sports Betting Dime this week about the Eastern Conference and who might come out of there, and I picked the Islanders to come out, and they were actually the longest shot. They were plus 414 at the start of the second round. they were plus 118 to just beat the Flyers and get past, Philly into the conference final. But, based on their game one showing, I see no reason to doubt them. They seem, they bought into Barry Trotz's system religiously, and that's another factor. And Barry Trotz is the only coach left in the playoffs who's won a cup.
Yeah. Well, you have more courage than I did. I talked on another podcast that I went over as a guest that I wanted desperately to take the Islanders because I've really been impressed by them. And I just couldn't pull the trigger just because Philadelphia had been so hot and it looked so good during the regular season, especially the second half. And then, I've just been watching them and they've got all the elements. And I just started to think, the Islanders, I like the way they play, but, in terms of talent and pure skill, they have trouble scoring goals. They're not a great offensive team. And I just couldn't do it. And now I regret that after watching that first game because they were impressive again, boy. And speaking of that, impressive, let's talk a little bit about the Capitals' decision to fire their coach, Todd Reirden. And in light of the fact that they were just eliminated by their former coach, Barry Trotz. And I just think if you're a Capitals fan, you're frosted about this because, they didn't have to lose Barry Trotz. And people want to cast that as strictly about the money. And that was a big part of it. They wouldn't give him the raise he wanted. But there was some underlying tension there caused by the fact that Reirden was McClellan's guy, and he wasn't really Barry Trotz's guy, and yet he was an associate coach, and Trotz really, I think, wanted to have his own staff. So, Trotz could still be there if they could have made peace and settled on the money, and who knows what would have happened. I mean, you can't say Washington would have done any better because we just don't know. I mean, the team has changed and so forth. But I let's put it this way. There's a lot of quality candidates out there, and guys with pedigrees of playoff success. I mean, Peter Laviolette's been to the finals with 3 different teams. He's won a Stanley Cup. Mike Babcock has won a Stanley Cup. Gerard Gallant took an expansion team to the Stanley Cup final. That's pretty good resumes. But none of those guys are going to be better for the Capitals than Barry Trotz was.
No, and I mean, I could see the logic of going to Reirden in that you just won the cup, major change, didn't seem to be a wise decision to make. Go with a guy from within, but when you go 2 years in a row and you're obviously regressing from where you were, I think now you had to pull the trigger and make the change. But like you said, they kind of created this own mess themselves because they didn't want to pay the guy who just won them the cup.
Yeah, and he's, it's obvious what his impact is. I mean, everywhere he goes, the teams perform a little bit better than you expect. Like, remember when he took over Nashville? Now, they didn't win anything, or, they weren't as good as Las Vegas. But I remember the one thing that was always said about Nashville in those early years is how hard they competed. And that was Barry Trotz. And then they get to Washington, and the year they won, what do we think about is how hard they competed. We saw Alex Ovechkin be a different kind of player than just a guy that went to his area of the ice in the the left wing circle and fire that cannon because he was blocking shots and playing just a different style of game under Barry Trotz. And now we see that with the Islanders. They have trouble scoring goals, but boy, they keep that puck out of their net. I don't know. I didn't look at the shots in the last game. Have they allowed any team to get 30 shots on goal yet? I'm not sure they have. I'd have to look. So
there's that old famous Harry Neal saying about coaching is that 5 guys in the room love you and 5 guys in the room hate you, and the key is to get the other 10 guys to hang out with the 5 guys who love you. But over the years, other than malcontents who pretty much hated every coach they ever played for, I can't recall a player who played for Barry Trotz who didn't rave about the experience and how much they enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, no, that's right, and that's part of the deal. Like, I don't think it's not rainbows and butterflies when you play for Mike Babcock. I think we all know that, and I think Peter Laviolette, even though I think he's primarily a player's coach, I think over time that he wears on you. Barry Trotz is just a communicator. Talks to guys. He talks to them with respect, and not that other coaches don't, because some of them do. He's an impressive coach, no doubt about it. And there are other coaches. Mike Sullivan's a great coach in Pittsburgh, but he's gone. That, like you said, there are great coaches that are not in the playoffs anymore because as good as they are, their teams didn't win.
Yeah, and we must be talking about the playoffs because once again we're in overtime here. We've gone past our 30-minute barrier, but it's hard to stop talking when you're talking hockey. We're going to stop right now, though, and welcome you back on Thursday for our next edition of the HockeyDebates.com podcast powered by SportsBettingDime.com. In the meantime, if you want to bet on some NHL games and you want some advice from some experts, check it out at SportsBettingDime.com. You'll find all the answers you're looking for and probably some you didn't know you even should be considering. I'm Bob. He's Kevin. We'll be back Thursday afternoon. And until then, everybody have themselves a great day.
I like our horn.